Secrets According to Humphrey, Chapter 6, Secret Books, Secret Looks. When I got to the library, I was tempted to look at the Secrets of the Nile video again, but I was there to find a book for Joey. It wouldn't be easy. I wasn't even sure what kind of book he would like. And even if I knew, how would I possibly find the right one in the rows and rows and rows of books in the library? "Don't mind me," I greeted the fish swimming in the glowing tank. "I'm here to get a good book." I really hoped that I would find the right book for Joey. And I really hoped it would be on the bottom shelf, because it would be unsqueakably hard or even impossible to get to the high shelves. Even just looking at the books on the lowest shelves would take a long time, because a library is a big place. And it's not easy to read the titles when you're a small hamster on the floor and the names of the books and the shelves are sideways. I have to squinch my neck to one side to read them. As I scurried along, I noticed that books were grouped together by subject. All the art books were together, all the history books were together, and all of the sport books were together. Mr. Fitch was a very smart man to think of that. But then suddenly, all the books were different, and I couldn't make sense of the titles. They weren't alike at all. When I saw a Robot Rabbit title, I realized that these books weren't about real things, like the art books and the history books. These books were stories. Fiction. That's what the big label above the shelves said. But the names on the books next to the titles were all grouped together. So there were the B names: Babcock, Badarsky, Benjamin, Bowman. Farther on, there were the K names: Cantor, Kelly, Kendricks. Those must be the authors' names, and they were in the order of the alphabet. So B-E came ahead of B-O, and K-A came before K-E. Mr. Fitch was even smarter than I thought before. I'll bet he can find any book in the library. But could I find the right book for Joey? I spent a good part of the night roaming around the library, hoping I'd see something that Joey would like. When I saw the light coming through the library windows, I scurried back to room 26. "I'm back," I squeaked as I slid under the door. "Boing, boing, boing," Og sounded excited. I glanced up at the clock. Mrs. Brisbane would be arriving soon. I raced across the floor as fast as my legs could carry me, hopped up to grab the bottom of the long blinds cord, and began swinging and swinging until I was at level with the table. Then I let go and leapt up to the tabletop. "I didn't find a book for Joey," I squeaked to Og as I hurried to my cage. "But I learned something about the library. I'll tell you later." I closed the door behind me and dived under my bedding. Just then I heard Mrs. Brisbane say, "Good morning, Humphrey and Og." I squeaked weakly and promptly went to sleep. I took a longer nap than usual, and when I woke up, room 26 was buzzing with activity. My friends had split up into their groups and were working on their projects. Tall Paul, Philippe, and Holly were using modeling clay to make something that looked like a boat that curved up on the ends. They were with the traders. Sophie, Nicole, and Small Paul were in the group lining up jars and bottles of different sizes that would be painted. Of course, they were the artists. I knew that Phoebe was a scribe. So, the squiggly things she was drawing, along with Cassie, Thomas, and Daniel, must have been the figures for the alphabet. The builders were using blocks of different sizes to make pyramids, but they were having a hard time getting the right shape. "Slow down, Simon," Kelsey said. "We need to start over because it's going to be too small." "Yeah, we want a big pyramid," Rolling Rosie reminded him. "Okay," Simon said. Then Rosie did a very odd thing. She looked over at Sophie, and when she caught her eye, she circled her hand around her face, touched her shoulders with both hands, and nodded. Sophie did the exact same thing, and then they both giggled. I wasn't the only one who noticed. "What are you doing?" Kelsey asked. "Oh, it's just a secret sign for our club," Rosie said. Kelsey looked surprised. "What club?" Simon asked. "I can't tell you because you're not in it," Rosie said. Simon shrugged. "You're copying Phoebe and me," Kelsey said. "You don't even know what our club is about." "And you don't know what our club is about," Rosie replied. "There's Sophie and Cassie and me so far." "Come on. We'll never get anywhere if we don't get this started, Simon complained. Boing, boing, Og twanged. I know, I squeaked back. Rosie was upset when Kelsey and Phoebe wouldn't let her in the club, so she made up her own. But none of them are acting very nice. I glanced around the room. The artists seemed to be a lot happier than the builders. Just Joey seemed to be the happiest of all. I'm going to make a lion because that's my favorite animal, he said. That's good, Small Paul said. The Egyptians decorated a lot of things with animals. I'm sure glad I'm an artist then, Joey said, because I like animals a lot. I think they're more interesting than people. Oh no, I squeaked loudly. Humans are incredibly interesting. Well, I want to put flowers on my jar, Sophie said. Flowers, Small Paul replied. I don't think the Egyptians did that. Suddenly, I heard a lot of laughing and looking over at the scribes. I've got another one, I heard Thomas say. What did the pyramid say to the baby pyramid? What? Cassie asked. How's your mummy? Everyone laughed, including me. How about this one? Why are mummies good at their jobs? Because they get wrapped up in their work, Thomas said. That got an even bigger laugh. Where did you learn all these mummy jokes? Daniel asked. In a joke book. I love joke books, Thomas said. I love all kinds of books. So do I, Daniel said. Can I look at yours? Sure, Thomas said. Hey, here's another one. What do you call a mummy who eats cookies in bed? I know that one, Daniel replied. A crummy mummy. Mrs. Brisbane came over to remind them to work on their hieroglyphics. When she turned away, I saw Phoebe look over at Kelsey. She waved her right hand, wiggled her fingers, and winked. What was that, Phoebe? Mrs. Brisbane asked. I guess she saw her out of the corner of her eye. Phoebe swallowed hard. I was waving to Kelsey. That's a funny way to wave, Mrs. Brisbane said. But she didn't say anything more. She continued on to the artist group. You're making a lot of progress, she said. I can already tell that's a lion you're making, Joey. Do you like my flowers, Mrs. Brisbane? Sophie asked. I'm going to make them all different colors. I do, Sophie, Mrs. Brisbane said. But I'm not sure if the ancient Egyptians actually put flowers on their jars. Joey, why don't you go ask Mr. Fitch if he has more books with pictures of ancient Egyptian jars, or something to show what kinds of animals they had in Egypt back then? Joey looked surprised. He'd have a book like that? I think so, Mrs. Brisbane said. Just ask him. Joey actually looked happy as he headed out the door. He looked even happier when he came back with a big, big, big book. Wait till you see, he told the other artists. Falcons and baboons and jackals. He pointed to pictures in the books while Sophie and Small Paul leaned in around him. I was glad there was at least one book Joey liked. But I still wanted to find him a book with a story in it that he liked. One that wasn't about Robot the Rabbit. We should have a meeting for our secret club, Rosie told Sophie and Cassie when they came back from lunch. Here's a sign for when we want to have a meeting. Then Rosie tapped the top of her head 3 times. Sophie and Cassie giggled and tapped their heads 3 times. Tall Paul was listening to them talking, and soon I heard him ask Small Paul if he wanted to start a secret club. We could make up a code and a secret signal. We could even make it Egyptian, Tall Paul explained. Maybe Philippe could be in it too. Great idea. We need a name, Small Paul said. How about the Flying Pharaohs? Tall Paul nodded, and the 2 boys huddled together, so I couldn't hear anymore. What's going on? Thomas asked as he headed toward his table. Tall Paul and Small Paul looked at each other, then looked at Thomas. Nothing, Tall Paul said. Nothing, Small Paul said. Luckily, just then Mrs. Brisbane told everyone to take a seat so she could give out the homework assignment. I was unspeakably surprised when I heard what it was. The homework was a riddle, but this riddle wasn't about a mummy. It was about the Sphinx. I loved learning about the pyramids with their treasures inside. I thought the mummy jokes were funny, and I loved pictures of the graceful boats that sailed down the Nile. But I didn't like to think about that Sphinx, especially after the dream I'd had. Class, remember that there was a Sphinx in ancient Greece? The Sphinx was usually known as a female in Greece and a male in Egypt, and the Greek Sphinx always had a riddle. Thomas raised his hand, and Mrs. Brisbane called on him. I remember that the Sphinx guarded the city, and if a stranger came and couldn't answer the riddle, something really bad happened. That's right, Mrs. Brisbane said, and your homework for tonight is to solve one. Here's what the Sphinx asked. What creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? Most of my classmates turned and looked at Thomas. He just shrugged. That one wasn't in the books I read. Mrs. Brisbane wrote the riddle on the board, and my friends copied it down. I'm usually sad to see the other students leave at the end of the day, but that day I was almost glad when the classroom was empty. I didn't want to see any more of my friends whispering, and I didn't want to see any more of my other friends feeling left out. And I wanted to work on the riddle. Mrs. Brisbane had already left, so I reached up behind my mirror for my notebook. Suddenly, the door to the room opened, which surprised me because it was way too early for Aldo to come in and clean. I scrambled to the front of my cage and saw Miss Mac coming toward me. Miss Mac is the wonderful human who brought me to room 26 in the first place. She was the one who told me that the students would learn a lot from me. She even told me I was handsome and smart. I didn't know she was a substitute teacher, so when she left, my heart was broken. She was away a long, long, long time. But then she came back to teach first grade at Longfellow School, and my heart feels a lot better now. I love all my friends and Mrs. Brisbane, too, but no one understands me like Miss Mac. Hey, Humphrey, she smiled as she leaned in close to the cage. How's my buddy? There she was, with her bouncy black curls and her big dark eyes. She still smelled like apples. I love apples, and I love Miss Mac. Hi, 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 I greeted her. Og bounced up and down. Boing, boing! Oh, Og, I didn't mean to forget you. How's my favorite frog? She asked. It was fine with me if Og happened to be Miss Mac's favorite frog. If she said he was her favorite animal, though, I might feel a little bit jealous. Miss Mac turned back to me. Humphrey, I have a secret to tell you. I love teaching first grade now, but I miss you. My whiskers quivered a little. I miss you too, Miss Mac, I squeaked. I thought of getting about another hamster, but to tell you the truth, I don't think there's a hamster in the world that can measure up to you, she said. My tail wiggle-waggled. But I think the students in room 12 deserve a classroom pet. It would help them, Miss Mac sighed. Maybe I'll get something different, like a turtle. Turtles are nice, but they are extremely slow. It would take a long time for a turtle to teach students anything. Anyway, I've been thinking about you a lot, so I stopped by to say hi and to tell you I miss you, she said. I'll come see you again soon. Yes, 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 please do, I told her. She started to leave, but then turned back. You know I wouldn't forget this, she said as she reached into her coat pocket. She opened the door to my cage and left a generous piece of apple on my bedding. Enjoy, she said. I couldn't wait to sink my teeth into its crunchy sweetness. I will, I squeaked. Miss Mac smiled. Oh, and please don't tell anybody what I said. It's just our little secret. Humphrey's top secret scribbles. The Sphinx and her riddle give me quite a fright. To solve her ancient secret, I might stay up all night.